Coming up in the Bahamas tonight, more than 11,000 Bahamians are now shareholders in the Arawak Port Development Company. Ahead tonight, who ended up with how many shares? And KFC employees say a 10-day-long industrial standoff has sent them to the welfare lines. All those stories and more straight ahead in the Bahamas tonight.
Covering the islands of the Bahamas, ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight.
This portion of the news is brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's, I'm loving it.
Good evening and welcome to the Bahamas Tonight, the National Report. I'm Kishla Adderley. Thanks for joining us. Topping the news tonight, more than 10,000 Bahamians are now shareholders in the Arawak Port Development Company. 2,000 of them are government employees who took advantage of the offer to get a salary advance. Today, the final report was revealed at a news conference explaining just how many people will the asset, oversubscribed to the tune of $30 million, be distributed. Clint Watson has the story.
Joining the 20 initial investors of the Arawak Port Company will be an additional 11,064 new Bahamian shareholders. Managing Director Mike Morris says a bottoms-up approach was used to determine the new shareholders.
Due to the very large number of applications, the maximum that any shareholder got was 115 shares in the company. So even though someone may have shown up with $100,000 to invest in the company, they were limited to the 115 because following the bottom-up formula, that's what the result was.
In the end, because of the large subscription, 3,388 people who applied for the minimum received those 50 shares. 333 were allotted 75 shares. 2,783 got 100 shares, and 4,560 got the maximum amount allotted of 115 shares. The only people rejected were less than a dozen whose checks bounced. Now, this means many people who applied for more than 115 shares will have to be reimbursed. Chief Financial Officer at APD, Dion Bethel, says though challenging, they are now ready to present the Board of Directors with the shareholders listing and also commencing returning more than $30 million in excess funds.
We will now move to a process for our listing on BISX, after which time the company and its shares will be traded publicly on BISX.
Transparency was key to ensure people didn't try to beat the system and gain additional shares. CFAL's Anthony Ferguson says this was the largest public offering in the history of the Bahamas, so the process was tedious and time-consuming. About 1,000 people tried to duplicate but were detected.
On the application, you had to provide your NIB number and your passport number. And so in the first instance, we would have scrubbed the data for any duplication of NIB numbers or passport numbers. Then we would have drilled down further any duplication of names. And then we would look for any number of interests for. And so at the end of the day, total applicants was about 12,100. So 12,100. And after we have taken out the duplicates, etc., we ended up with about 11,064.
Some 4,000 checks will be returned to people. Providence Advisors Ken Kerr says the shareholders represent a good cross-section of the Bahamas.
Yeah, the offering was for $10 million. Subscriptions total approximately $44.6 million, I think. So it means that 34.5 will be returned to investors. What is interesting to note, too, statistically, that more than 95% of the applicants are actually individuals.
Now, beginning Thursday, you have a 2-week window to pick up those checks here at CFAL in the 308 East Bay Street building. After that, it'll be mailed to you. Clint Watson, ZNS News.
After 2 weeks of testimony, closing submissions are expected to take place Thursday in the Desmond Key manslaughter trial. Key was arrested on a traffic violation back in June of 2007 and allegedly beaten while in custody at the Grove Police Station. He was hospitalized for months and eventually died in 2009. 37-year-old Corporal Donovan Gardner is charged with manslaughter in Key's death, and he's now the lone defendant since the court acquitted Gardner's co-accused 33-year-old Constable Tavares Bodlag of abetment to commit manslaughter. Once both sides complete closing submissions, Gardner's fate will be in the hands of the jury. Baptist minister Bishop Randy Fraser is no longer appealing his sentence on an unlawful sex charge, but he's still appealing his conviction. Fraser's attorney Jarim Mangra told the appellate court today of Fraser's decision. Fraser was sentenced to 3 years in prison last November on conviction of an unlawful sexual relationship with a 16-year-old girl he was counseling over several months. The 54-year-old immediately filed an appeal and applied for bail until his court hearing. However, the court dismissed his bail application. During today's proceedings, Fraser's attorney, Jarim Mangra, tried to convince the court that the magistrate's decision to convict Fraser based on the evidence of the victim is unreasonable due to the gross inconsistencies in her testimony regarding the frequency and timing of the alleged sexual encounters. The KFC talks are said to be progressing, but in the meantime, workers say the standoff has sent them to the welfare line. It's now day 10 of the closure of the fast food chain, and workers are hoping the process will speed up. Clint Watson reports.
Significant progress made in that early meeting Tuesday at the Department of Labor with KFC management and the hotel union. Although Labor Minister Dion Folks, who's mediating, had to leave for a cabinet meeting, he told ZNS News he left negotiations taking place with Director of Labor Harcourt Brown chairing the talks.
In principle, I think we have movement on all of the major issues, and I think we're very close to bringing a conclusion to this matter at KFC. I impressed upon both sides that the fact that almost 300 Bahamian families are being affected, and we'd like to have an agreement so the stores can open and that the employees at KFC can go back to work.
We know progress is being made, if only by the mere fact that KFC is negotiating again, despite saying earlier they would no longer recognize the union.
There's no provision in our law that allows an employer who has given recognition voluntarily to withdraw that. So I made it very clear, and I gave a certificate to the Bahamas Hotel Catering Island Workers Union certifying them as a bargaining agent, and management is respecting that.
Describing the tone of those negotiations, he says both sides are very mature and respectful.
As usual in these negotiations, the problem is in the detail on each item, and that is what we're trying to work out.
KFC said last week it will not pay employees while stores are closed, but employees are still reporting to work every day. The minister opted not to comment on this as he is mediating talks and wanted to remain neutral. Some employees have sought assistance from the Department of Social Services in the form of food stamps and financial aid during this period.
Whatever assistance that we can give to the workers at KFC from the Department of Social Services, I've instructed my officers to assist. Obviously, we'll have to follow the regulations.
Now, the minister is hoping these employees won't need any long-term assistance. In fact, he's optimistic that real soon they can come to an agreement and solve this matter, as they did with customs and immigration officers. Clint Watson, ZNS News.